Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel Rubenstein. Today is February 27th, 2025, and this is the live daily briefing of the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's Office. Phase 1 of the hostage ransom payment is complete. Last night, Hamas returned the bodies of Ohad Yahalomi, Tzachi Idan, Shlomo Mansour, and Itzik El-Garat. Yahalomi, Idan, and El-Garat were murdered while they were hostages in Gaza. Mansour was murdered on October 7th, 2023, and his body was taken into Gaza and held until Israel paid a ransom payment to receive it back. During phase 1, Hamas returned 33 Israeli hostages, living and dead, to Israel in exchange for the release of more than 1,000 Palestinian terrorists and Gazans detained since October 7th, and the withdrawal of Israeli forces from almost all of Gaza. Right now, after phase 1 is complete, Hamas remains the government of Gaza. Hamas can exert control in every city of Gaza. Hamas has already launched rockets, and it is testing Israel's border defenses. The Hamas government of Gaza receives the trucks of food and supplies that enter Gaza, taxes the food and supplies that enter Gaza, and uses the revenue from the food and supplies that enter Gaza to pay its fighters and recruit new ones. That's where we are at the end of phase 1. Hamas is armed and dangerous. It's not clear that we will ever reach phase 2 of the hostage ransom payment. Phase 2 of the hostage ransom payment says that the Israeli military will withdraw 100% from Gaza and release an undetermined number of Palestinian terrorists from Israeli prisons in exchange for the remaining hostages, most of whom are male Israeli soldiers. Here's the problem. Israel's main war goal is the destruction of Hamas's military and government capabilities. If Israel agrees to implement phase 2 now, then at the end of phase 2, Hamas will remain the government of Gaza, and Hamas will continue to have a military in Gaza. The Prime Minister of Israel is insisting that Israel maintain control of the Philadelphia corridor on the Gaza-Egypt border, so that the Hamas government of Gaza is not able to smuggle weapons above and below the border. How we proceed from here is anyone's guess. The future of Gaza is the subject of intense international diplomacy right now, involving the United States, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and others. Many people are calling on the Israeli government to pay any price to save the lives of the Israeli hostages who remain in Gaza. I hear many prominent voices say that Israel should first pay the ransom in order to save the hostages and then destroy Hamas. I wish it was that simple. Why would Hamas release the hostages if Hamas knows that Israel will destroy Hamas after Hamas releases the hostages? The hostages are Hamas's insurance. The hostages are Hamas's protection, keeping some hostages forever. And pretending to be open to negotiations for their release is how Hamas is protecting itself from paying the price for the October 7th massacre. At best, Israel can promise Hamas terrorists safe passage to a third country and a ransom payment in cash if they release the hostages and lay down their weapons. But Hamas cannot remain in power in Gaza if we want to prevent more wars in the future. I need to share with you an uncomfortable truth. The October 7th war cannot be reduced to a hostage crisis that can be solved with a ransom payment. Let's imagine for a moment that the October 7th massacre was only a massacre and that no hostages were taken. The minimum proper response to the invasion of 3,000 men and the massacre of 1,200 people is the destruction of the government that ordered the invasion and the military that carried out the massacre. The fact that Hamas took 251 hostages in addition to massacring 1,200 people does not mean that Hamas should be protected from the consequences of massacring 1,200 people. This is basic logic. It's common sense. If Hamas had not taken a single hostage on October 7th, it would not change the fact that Hamas must be destroyed. Hamas promises to carry out more October 7th style massacres until Israel is destroyed. Hamas is the enemy of humanity, and it must be destroyed whether the hostages come home or not. Let's take some questions from everyone watching on our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and then I'll get back to work. Please.
Thank you, Daniel. The first question today comes from Johnny Sachs on Instagram, who asks, will the people of Gaza be able to leave Gaza if they want to? Is there a plan?
This is the big question. What will be the future of Gaza? Right now, Hamas is the government of Gaza and it refuses to make peace with Israel. I hope we will have a future where the government of Gaza is not Hamas and will instead be a government that wants to make peace with Israel. In the meantime, I believe that anyone in Gaza who wants to leave Gaza should be able to leave Gaza, and any country around the world that wants to help the people of Gaza have a better life should open their borders and give Gazans immigration visas. Right now, very few countries are willing to accept hardly any refugees from Gaza. Egypt would be the most logical choice for an exit point for the Palestinians in Gaza, but Egypt, for the most part, keeps its border closed. Israel has offered to allow Palestinians to leave Gaza in transit to third countries. This would mean going through the port of Ashdod or leaving through an Israeli airport near the city of Eilat. I saw that the defense minister of Israel, Israel Katz, published a statement about this today, that Israel is in the process of accelerating the establishment of what he said is voluntary migration and allowing those who want to leave Gaza to leave Gaza. How this plan plays out in practice remains to be seen. I know that Hamas has an interest in keeping as many civilians in Gaza as human shields so that it can continue its war. I'll be watching just as you are.
Our next question comes from Jesse on YouTube, who asks, what do you make of Israel's new policy in Syria? Defense Minister Katz said southern Syria must be a demilitarized zone.
Thank you, Jesse, for this question. I find it fascinating that Israel is willing to assert itself and protect itself against uncertainty in Syria. It shows that the Israeli government and military is feeling more confident about what it's able to do and what is possible. Since the overthrow of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, the dictator of Syria, he has been replaced by a coalition of rebel groups called HTS that are comprised of groups that are linked to ISIS, offshoots of al-Qaeda. We have many questions about the government of Syria, its goals, its purpose. Will it protect the minorities of Syria? All of these questions are wide open, but what we are seeing in southern Syria is a lot of Druze. The Druze minority are in southern Syria. They do not want to be ruled by an al-Qaeda offshoot out of Damascus. Think about what it means for the president of Syria to have been connected to al-Qaeda in the past and only branched off a few years ago. To be part of al-Qaeda means to support the 9/11 attacks on the United States. It means to think that flying planes into buildings is a good idea, and you want to be part of an organization that does that. If I found out that someone like this became the president of the country next to me, I would be very cautious, and I also would not want that person's military to get anywhere near me or the minority groups in Syria that seek better relations with their neighbors, as the Druze do. So it's very interesting what Israel is doing in southern Syria. I hope it leads to a better future for as many people as possible in the region, and that the minority groups in Syria will not be oppressed by a central government in Damascus that has an ideological core that is connected to al-Qaeda or ISIS or the Muslim Brotherhood.
All right, our next question comes from Shiri on Instagram, who asks, I saw that the IDF targeted a Hezbollah terrorist yesterday in Lebanon. What does this mean for the ceasefire in Lebanon?
Last November, the governments of Israel and Lebanon agreed to a ceasefire, which is in effect Israel agreeing to a ceasefire with Hezbollah. The terms of the ceasefire require Hezbollah to disarm. That's what it means to reference UN Security Council Resolution 1701, and it's common sense that a functioning country cannot have a militia within that country that does not answer to the central government of that country, and in this case, in Lebanon, answers to the government of Iran. That's a recipe for more war. As far as Israel is concerned, if Hezbollah is armed, it's a violation of the ceasefire deal, and Israel reserves the right to enforce the deal rather than wait around for Hezbollah to grow stronger, as happened in the past, and it led to the reality of Hezbollah being very strong, armed, and dangerous, so that after October 7th, it could join the war that Hamas started. The IDF said in a statement yesterday that it targeted a Hezbollah terrorist named Mahran Ali Nasser ad-Din. This guy was responsible for smuggling weapons into Lebanon from Iran through Syria. So what it indicates is that Hezbollah is trying to rearm, that Iran is trying to send more weapons to Hezbollah, so that we'll get into a situation again where Israel has a terrorist army armed on its border, calling for the destruction of Israel. From Israel's perspective, this is unacceptable. It's a non-starter, and Israel's not going to wait for anyone to enforce the terms of this ceasefire agreement, which say that Hezbollah must disarm.
Thank you, Daniel. And our last question today comes from Laura B. Brower on Instagram, who asks, how do you think it is possible to get rid of Hamas without completely decimating Gaza along with the hostages?
First of all, we need to agree on the goal, that the goal is to get rid of Hamas, and that needs to be our starting point. From this starting point, there are many ideas, plans, options, and strategies that Israel's government, its military officials will be planning. These are tactical questions, and we can discuss all of the variables, such as the amount of aid that goes into Gaza, the safe routes for civilians to escape from Gaza and go to third countries. There's many elements that can be discussed. I'm not going to give away my military ideas live on the camera, but we have to agree on the main goal first, which is that Hamas cannot be the government of Gaza. But what's adding to the challenge is it's not just a war against Hamas and its military in Gaza, but that same Hamas military that we want to destroy is holding hostages. And any attempt to destroy this Hamas military could result in the death of the hostages that Hamas wants to hold on to so that Hamas can protect itself. That's why we're in a more complicated situation than we've perhaps ever been in the history of urban warfare, that the enemy is holding hostages a very short distance away from Israel. It's all very small geography. We're going to need much more creative diplomacy. Right now is a chance for diplomacy for other countries of the world, such as the US, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and anyone else interested in a better future, for them to say with a clear voice and to send the message to Hamas and Hamas's backers, Qatar, Turkey, and Iran, that the status quo is unacceptable, that the whole world is united in the fact that Hamas cannot remain the government of Gaza and it can't have a military in Gaza. And once there is unity on this goal, then we can discuss the tactics and I think achieve a desirable outcome. Thank you all for listening. This has been a live daily briefing of the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's Office. If I wasn't able to get to your question, you can of course find me, Daniel Rubenstein, on social media platforms. Thank you for listening. It's Thursday. We'll be back on Sunday, 3 p.m., right here from Tel Aviv, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Until then, Shabbat Shalom.